Hello folks, imagine yourself 175 years ago. You're looking for greater opportunities out west and you hear that the Emigrant Road, or today as we call it the Oregon Trail, was a long journey that eventually brought you to lands full of opportunity and prosperity. It was a long journey and there were treacherous stretches that you and anyone you were with along the journey had to cross. We're now walking directly on the ruts upon which hundreds of wagon wheels and hundreds of animals more trampled across. Now luckily for us history enthusiasts, much of the Oregon Trail is preserved in some way. Either you can drive on pavement, on roads, which used to be like these, just simple paths and ruts, or they're preserved in its original state like these. There were plenty of stretches, especially out west where you had to cross mountains, and different mountain passes and valleys would be able to directly guide a party traveling west. This is where we are. We're walking directly in the shadows of history. Now we've been on the Oregon Trail before, namely in Nebraska and Wyoming, but we're sort of here in the last state that the Oregon Trail goes along. Yeah, that's right, we're back in Oregon, one more day. I think there's like little sections right at the end. It kind of gets complicated at the end of the trail once you reach western Oregon, so sometimes people would cross the Columbia River into Washington State, but for all intents and purposes, let's just pretend that we are at the last leg. Oregon. It's a state so expansive that west and east are completely different. Doesn't it look like mountain country interior west rather than just Pacific Northwest coastal forests? Oh yeah, for much of Oregon this is exactly what it looks like. Plants only to be seen here that can withstand the arid conditions. Now it's easy to see here when there's no trees of great magnitude blocking our view. We have a clear view for miles on end as we're walking along these ruts. And in the distance we see snow-capped mountains. Well, it's the end of May, and we're still seeing snow in some places. That must be very, very cold up at the summits of those. For glacial ice and snow to be up there. Is there ice on those mountains or is it just snow? I don't know. On the other side of this little hill is actually an interpretive center. One of many interpretive centers on the Oregon National Historic Trail, where you can learn a lot more than just me speaking to you guys about the Oregon Trail. There's fun little exhibits, and gee, I really wanted to go inside to learn myself, but it's closed until I think next year. So if you're seeing this a year in advance, 2 years, 3 years, however much time down the line, right outside of today's destination, which we'll be going to soon, is a fun little interactive venue to learn about the trail which completely altered American history and the American Western history as we know it. Now much of eastern Oregon's surroundings falls under the region known as the Blue Mountains. This is eastern Oregon's premier great mountain chain. It's not quite part of the official Rocky Mountains, but it's like a western extension of them. And much of these mountains fall within the federal designation of the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest. And despite what we see here, just a bunch of shrubland and chaparral, there are some forests, most of the time at the foothills and at the base of those larger Blue Mountains, because that's where the climate permits them to grow. So we have some stellar geography in eastern Oregon, very different from western Oregon. And today we're going to be getting a taste of what life is like here in eastern Oregon. Why did people come here? Why are there people here in the middle of the wilderness? And much like eastern Washington, how does eastern Oregon differ from its western counterpart? With that being said, let me welcome you, although we're walking miles away from the actual city center on these great Oregon trail ruts, let me welcome you to the great city of Beaver State, Oregon. With about 10,000 people, it's not going to be one of Oregon's largest cities, but at one time it was the largest city between two major American cities. And I'm going to save the real details for a bit later, but it did play a great role in the frontier's history. So before we head on to our 48th state, let's take one more day here in Oregon and get to understand a different side of it. And throughout today's adventures, let's just appreciate the fact that we're not in the well-known part of Oregon. We're not in Portland anymore. We're not on the Oregon coast. We're not in any of those national parks. Yeah, we're not in any of those well-known parts of the state. We're in a very tucked away, hidden region of Oregon. I just find that so exciting. So let's begin our adventures today in Beaver State, Oregon. Well, we've arrived in the downtown of Beaver State, and I think it definitely shows that an intangible part of this community is the effects of the Oregon Trail. It seems like all the businesses really love to promote the old frontier character of this land. What greets you when you first enter York's Covered Wagon, a little general store, deli, cafe area, full of all your needs that you might need on the road. There's such a parallel because in the front there's a sign of all the things you might need, all the things you might want to buy and pack for your journey on the Oregon Trail. Bacon, coffee, dried fruit, flour, lard, beans, salt and pepper, lots of other equipment. Oh yeah. Map murals are just the best. I mean, look at this. It's a beautiful display of all the natural and human geography of the West. I mean, we could trace our path on the Best of the Most West Trail since maybe Sacramento. We went up to Nevada, saw a couple of these locations, went up to the Redwoods, up the coast, well not the coast, we sort of went inland, up to Salem, Portland, there's the Columbia River, we went up to Olympia, and now we're right here in Beaver State. As it advertises, this may truly be the world's largest map of the Oregon Trail. This is Beaver State, everyone. Established in 1874, it was named after Edward D. Baker. And what's so special about this guy? Well, not only was he one of Oregon's first senators, but he was the only senator to be killed in conflict. Yeah, in 1861, fighting on behalf of the Union front, he was sadly killed by enemy Confederate forces. Now, wouldn't you respect the heck out of your political leaders if they too made the same sacrifices as you did on the front lines, out facing the first firing lines? I mean, that's a scary thing to be on the front lines. It's a very brave thing to be on the front lines, and to have, you know, your political leaders fighting shoulder to shoulder with you. I mean, that's one heck of a respectable act. I hear tales of historical leaders doing that, but it's not a common thing you see too much anymore in the modern day. I guess today's politicians are comfortable living lavishly. Fair enough. And thus, Baker City was named in honor of him. As you know, the story of the West is primarily that of, hey, should we settle the West? Should we settle this place? I don't know. Maybe. Doesn't look too good. Just seems like a lot of desolate areas. Oh wait, there's this resource? You're telling me there's this? Oh, we gotta settle immediately. Let's get all our go-getter friends, go over there and extract as much as we can. Oh wait, we took everything? That quickly? Oh, time to leave. So largely that's just what happens. Whether it's gold, silver, oil, or wood, do we dare settle it? Yes, we should. So that was the story of Baker City. Gold was found here in those northeastern Oregonian mountains. And so the people who may have years ago gone west through these passes on their way to greener pastures, literally, they would have gone straight back here when they heard about gold in order to search and prospect for the riches that would come with a lot of gold found here. That and the Oregon Shortline Railroad came to town. That's right, Baker City was one of the many recipients, these small towns who received such prosperity from being a railroad city. The railroad would do many things, but one of which, most importantly, honestly, is turn a small little dinky village into a thriving city. Because now you were kind of isolated. It took days to travel to the next town on horseback or carriages or wagons or whatever you had here. So now you were connected with the entire country on a very short amount of time. Record unprecedented speed would connect one town to another via the new railroads that were taking shape all across the country. So this meant for Baker City that it would be connected via a very, very short amount of time to two of the already existing largest cities on the west, Portland and Salt Lake City. So that meant that it was a waypoint between those two cities. It was a great hub for transportation, and this city grew to be one of the largest in Oregon at the time, and the largest between those two cities. I think now Baker City's size has been eclipsed, supplanted by another city, a city we will be visiting tomorrow. Latitude 45? Yeah, that's right. Oregon sits right on the 45th parallel. Yeah, parallel's latitude, I think. Meridian's longitude. 45 degrees north is halfway between the equator, 0 degrees, and the North Pole, 90 degrees. And for that reason, all these small little towns in Oregon, which sit close to or right on this 45th parallel, will have a fun time showcasing the fact that they are 45 degrees north. That's not to say that Baker City has, too, gone through its period of rough times. In the early 20th century, I guess 2 words were too much. The residents decided to drop the city, keep the baker. And for a good part of the 1900s, the town was just known as Baker. No city, it was just Baker. But that was reversed by the end of the century. And now we can safely call this place Baker City. Yeah, have no fear, you can call it Baker City. You could keep the city along with the baker. That's just how it plays out some of these cities. They decide to do a name change and then go back on that name change some years later. And this was another example of that. I, for one, feel lucky that I get to live and travel through this city during a time when I can safely call it Baker City. Yeah, neither you or I have to worry about hushing down, keep quiet, about how we feel truly about this city. It may just have a small population, but I think the legacy it holds truly makes it deserve the title of city. So be proud when you say Baker City, because the city is important. Now this is some fascinating stuff. A real hidden gem. In a hidden gem. I mean, Baker City is already kind of off the radar of the mainstream touristic labels and routes, but a real hidden gem of this area is the Baker City Chinese cemetery. It's believed that hundreds of foreign workers from China came to Eastern Oregon, as they did in many different regions of the Pacific Coast, as we've seen previously. They worked in California when the gold rush occurred, and they worked here in Eastern Oregon when Oregon had its own Oregonian gold rush. They faced a lot of discrimination and were limited to certain undesirable jobs, but nevertheless their community persisted through those odds, and from the late 1800s to the middle of the 20th century, they made their names here and they placed down a legacy that is memorialized here at this cemetery. This was full of bodies and grave sites and all that, but later these bodies were exhumed and many of the remains were sent back to China, Guangdong province, in the south of the country, as was tradition there. So, yeah, that really sums up our day here in Baker City. I really enjoyed my day here. I hope you guys enjoyed this little glimpse into the lesser known parts of the Beaver State. Yeah, very hospitable environment, very friendly people, great traffic, and I don't mean as in like a multitude or a great amount. I mean that people actually behave on the road. There's no loud motors, nobody who doesn't know how to drive. You know, many cities have that problem, but it doesn't seem too apparent here in Baker City. And there's a lot of Victorian architecture. What is up with that? I guess the people of Baker City really wanted to cater towards the people from the East Coast who were used to that type of architecture. Perhaps that was the reason they built such fancy, ornate, colorful facades on the exterior of the buildings. It does have a nice touch that such architecture is preserved to the modern day today. Overall, very pleasant city. Gets my coverage project stamp of approval. You know, it would be a fun idea to carry around a little rubber stamp, and every place I go that really captures my enthusiasm, I find a place to stamp the little stamp I have. That would be a fun idea. Anyway, this ends our leg in Oregon. We are done with the Beaver State on this tour. Why is Oregon so important? It's just another state, right? Well, not exactly. It was a very important state historically. Yeah, it was the massive waves of migrants heading forth towards the Oregon country on the Oregon Trail that helped secure the whole Northwest. The Pacific Northwest was a very contested area of land fought by the British, Russians, Americans, even I think the Mexican government really wanted the Pacific Northwest. And the Americans got it. We were victorious, and it was because of the massive amount of population that moved west that helped secure America a strong sense of border security from coast to coast. Our power dramatically increased as the California Trail, the Oregon Trail, the Mormon Trail, all spurred a westward expansion. Yeah, this is the movement that really kick-started America's dominance across the continent. So people living on the West Coast, you have Oregon to thank that you live in such a place. That's going to do it. That is going to end our adventures in this state. We are done with Oregon. 3 states left. Can you believe it? Only 3. 3! And tomorrow, we'll be kicking one of them down from the 3 remaining. So when you visit Oregon, make sure not to simply just visit the western extremities. Don't just visit Portland or the western coastline. They're beautiful places with lots of culture, but give Eastern Oregon a chance as well. You never know when you might stumble upon some great hidden gems. This is just one mere town of many cities in Eastern Oregon. Well, I'll leave it off at that. Tomorrow, we begin our journey in our 48th state. And I can't wait. I'll just leave the video off for us to begin our adventures then. So with that said, I bid you all adieu. From the Baker City Chinese Cemetery, in front of the grocery outlet, bargain market of Baker City, with a truck coming by, probably to deliver some nice goods. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.